All the federal leaders weighing in today on the announcement by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, and Japan's Asahi Kasei Corporation announcing a $1.6 billion electric vehicle part plant in Port Colborne, Ontario today. Now, it's the latest in Ontario's push to become an EV hub, as one that comes as North America's industry is making global headlines as well. U.S. President Joe Biden announcing today punishing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and advanced batteries. Now, to break down the politics at play here, let's bring in our front bench. Joining me today are former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair. And Laura Stone is Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Thank you all for joining us. Brian, let's start with you. When you combine the news from the United States and the suite of announcements that we've seen lately, and the Prime Minister talking about friendshoring, clearly there are some politics at play here.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's no question that in this stage for this government and with the looming election, year and a half, maybe earlier, it's always top of mind. I think they feel that these announcements, the suite of announcements with regards to EVs, has been a positive one. They feel that this would be something that would be a boost on their sort of economic credibility. But of course, that comes with some risk. And I think you can see the sort of nuance in the responses by Jagmeet Singh and Poilievre, where they're basically saying, not that they're against what's happening with these investments, but they're also sort of putting some groundwork to basically say that this could be a problem. So really, they're sort of having these nuanced reactions. So I think that really sort of sets the stage as to what this means. It could be very positive, but of course, if something kind of ends up not working out, some of the investment that the federal government put in to make these happen sort of blows up in their face, obviously could be a problem. So I think you really see it in the reactions of the opposition.
Yeah, Lisa, pick up on that and that possibility of some of these things, as Brian just said, blowing up in their face.
Well, that's the reality. We've got an election in November in the United States. The outcome of that election could very well mean that Canada could be slapped with a 100% tariff on EVs coming across the border. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, that's the kind of world that we're living in right now. I think the big thing for me, though, Mike, and it's following along the questions that you're asking the minister and that Pierre Poilievre is asking the minister, which is about these job guarantees. If you look in the United States, they actually wrap around all their policies on the worker that's getting the job, making sure that there's training for them. They talk about pipelines of workers to be able to get these new jobs that are being created as they retool for EVs. That's completely missing in what the Liberals are talking about. And that's why I believe that they're so open to criticism. They really should nail down exactly where does the individual worker stand in this, put all of the questions about foreign workers coming into bed. They've done that in the United States. They are very equally able to say here in Canada that everything we're doing is about making sure that the Canadian worker gets the jobs that are coming from transition, even go as far as saying we're going to rehire the people who have already been displaced as a result of moving to EVs. Those are the things that Canadians want to hear, and they should get it because that's a heck of a lot of money that we're investing.
Yeah, I'll pick up that in just a second. But first, Tom, how much of this is also about building an industry and really insulating the industry that may help work with the United States ahead of a possible Trump presidency?
I think that that's a key point. We were always going back to the Auto Pact, which preceded both the North American Free Trade Agreement and the Canada-US FTA. This was the major deal that we had made going way back, and that stuck for so long. We were able to rely on that to be part of that supply chain. So we have to up our game. It is a massive investment. Lisa's right. And I'll just say two things. I heard Minister Champagne touting Bécancour. Well, the biggest thing that was supposed to be happening in Bécancour was a plant by Ford Motor Company that they've just put on ice. They just said it's not ready. This thing, even though they had started building it, it was out of the ground. They're putting the kibosh on it for now. It doesn't look like it's ever going to come back. With regard to Mr. Poilievre's idea, we're going to get faster approvals. There's a big plant being proposed, being built. In fact, they're clearing the land, and that's the problem. The land is massive wetlands and very precious habitat for biodiversity on the beautiful Richelieu River just south of Montreal. And the government rejigged the rules so that they would not have to go through the compulsory public hearing board. So there was no public hearings on this thing. And the public is really upset. Nobody is opposed to the idea of being part of creating these so-called green jobs, being part of the electric vehicle revolution. But everybody's saying it can't come at the expense of even looking at what the potential downside is on the environment and what the potential advantages are if we're part of that revolution. So governments are pushing aside those rules. Mr. Poilievre knows that, but he chooses not to mention it. But it doesn't go over very well because public acceptance, public acceptability has to be any part of these projects if they're actually going to succeed.
Now, Laura, you were at the announcement today. Both governments certainly glad-handing and smiling, but they're also short on the details about jobs that this will create. How important is that? And picking up on what Lisa said, you know, when you hear about it in the United States, they really sort of present it as a sort of, as she had said, a wraparound approach here and really framing it that way. But we're not getting that from this government or these governments.
There is definitely a dearth of details on the fine print of these things. Neither government can say how many jobs will be created because it sounds like the deal is still being negotiated between the company and the province. How many foreign workers are coming to train the Canadian workforce on how this technology is to be used, which was confirmed by officials today. They can't say, but they say it will be a small number and it will be short term, but no one can say exactly what short term means. I think there's a rush here to rubber stamp these deals and try to get ahead of an industry that the government thinks is going to be the next big thing. I think the federal government is insulated by the fact that this is so broadly supported by the Ontario Progressive Conservative government as well. This isn't just the federal Liberal government standing there and patting themselves on the back. The Ontario government is fully on board with what's happening here, and I think that's to the benefit of both of them. But, you know, I think at the heart, these announcements are very much local announcements. We're talking about so much money. We're talking about investment tax credits that are in the federal Liberal budget and direct and indirect investment from the province, which, again, was not exactly spelled out today. But you talk to the local mayor, you talk to the regional chairs. They're extremely excited about this. They think this is going to be a boon to their communities. And I really do think this is something that is about the local community reaction as much as it is about the national message from the parties.
Yeah, Brian, there's one piece that I was asking Minister Champagne about, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of details on that. And, you know, holistically, he wants to be part of this supply chain. On the back end of it is the confidence or lack thereof that Canadians may or may not have in the charging network that we don't have right now and that really needs to be built up pretty quickly. Why do you think this government isn't focusing on that, or they don't have the answers to when they'll be able to build that up, and how much of a vulnerability is that?
Yeah, I mean, don't shoot the messenger, but I think often governments are a little more focused on the things that they can do right now and that will have an impact right now. To the point that to Laura's argument, maybe they're even doing it a little hastily. They're trying to get the announcement out, even if all the details haven't been figured out. So governments are certainly prone to that. There's no question. You know, there's a whole discussion on why it's like that with our electoral system. But nevertheless, there is a bit of that going on. So when it comes to the charging stations, which I think was a great point to bring up, Mike. I mean, it's something that feels a little more far out for government, right? Government's sort of like, yeah, I mean, of course we'll need more of that, but right now we got to get these things in place, and we'll figure that out kind of later. But to the point that you made in the questions, there has to be a plan now. There has to be some investments now. There are challenges already, and those challenges will exacerbate if we don't start to act on it now. So I think, if I'm being honest, I think that's probably the reason, reading between the tea leaves, that it's just sort of government being a little more focused on what can we get as outcomes right now, and those things can be, you know, future problems and challenges that we address at that time.
Short-sighted, though, Lisa?
Look, I don't believe that the government should be funding or not funding. I don't believe the government should be building these charging stations. I think the role of the government is providing guarantees that there will actually be customers for these charging stations and let the private sector build these and get them done across the country. If the federal government is so sure that the number of people who are going to convert to EVs by 2035 are such that a private industry is going to be able to make investment decisions on that, then they should back it by giving a guarantee, because the uncertainty should not lay at the feet of the private sector because they don't quite know what's going to happen. So if the feds believe it's going to happen, give them the guarantee, get these things built, and then we'll see what ends up happening. But do they believe they can do it?
Tom,
that's the question.
But Tom, one of the counter arguments is, in a sense, and I hate to use a movie line, but if you build it, they will come. Yeah, you can build the cars, but if people don't feel like they can be reliably, filling them up and charging them at places, isn't that an issue?
It's a huge issue, and it's one that's been debated well at the university level. And the final conclusion, even of people who were very skeptical at the beginning, was exactly your line, that you have to build them. And then people will see the availability. I just happen to be chairman of the board of Earth Day Canada, and we put together something that, built up with a private business, with Sobeys IGA, to put fast chargers in a lot of their grocery store parking lots, and it's worked. So there are tons of things that can be done, private sector, subsidies from the government. I have to say that Stephen Guilbeault has been very good on this part of the file. He has really put some money in place. Obviously, it's our money, it's public money, but they've dedicated a lot of money to making sure that we can build up the number of chargers available. Because for people like me, who have an electric car, but I also have my own garage, pretty easy. But if you live in town and you're in a 5-story building and you're on the street and you can't get to a charger, it's very difficult. And you're not going to convince yourself that it's a viable mode of transportation unless you can have access to a charger. So I think that the government does have to play a role in building it up. It is a huge transition, a generational transition away from fossil fuels and towards electric vehicles. And I think we can do it if we show the type of creativity that we've just talked about.
Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Laura will be first out of the gate.